Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
And so doing daughtering is about the multiplicity of ways that we perform that, and has to do with how we give daughtering as a gift, how we do daughtering as obligation, just to have a conversation about it that says this is a beautiful part of women's life and a beautiful part of our identity.
Hey friend, I am so glad you're here. This is the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. We are in season 9. Season 9. I cannot believe it. Hundreds of episodes you can go check out in the archives on all kinds of topics. But you know what? This topic today, this is the first time we've really covered it this intently, this specifically. And I have to tell you, this specific topic that we're going to be talking about was my very first role in life, which was being a daughter. And I have with me today the expert on mothering and daughtering and all those roles that we play, the dynamics between. I have Dr. Allison Alford on today, and I cannot wait for you to hear what she has to share with us. So let's give her a welcome to the AllMomDoes podcast. Dr. Alford, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so glad to be here, Julie. Thank you. And I love that you started with that. This was your first role. It's a current role. It's with you till the day you die. And, being a daughter doesn't get enough attention. It doesn't get enough recognition. So I'm glad to talk about it.
Absolutely. I'm sure that you have seen a lot of this floating around too. I feel like the conversation around daughtering is accelerating. I'm seeing a lot of women in my age and stage of life who are reflecting back on, wow, being a daughter, the way that it shaped me, the way it shaped how I saw I was supposed to interact in the world and how I was supposed to be and all the things. It's absolutely fascinating to see a lot of us taking more of this longitudinal look back and saying, I wonder if that's why I'm this way, or I think about things this way or that way. I want to hear from you how you began your work, how you pursued that PhD, and how that led you to starting to look at the relationship of daughtering. I want to hear what this arc was for you.
Yeah, I love thinking about that, women are taking a look at our lives with more complexity and saying, what are my various roles and responsibilities and who am I accountable to? And also, where did all my ideas come from? And one of those important ways to consider is daughter. I'm a daughter. I'm a daughter in my family, and that is something that has shaped me, even if I haven't really articulated that until today. So when I was in graduate school at UT Austin, which love speaking with a fellow Texan today.
Yep, absolutely.
I was learning a lot about family communication. That's the degree that I was earning. So we're, reading and researching all about different family types, the roles in the family systems, positive family communication, negative family communication. But I was also taking classes in psychology and social work. And it was in one of these spaces that I read an article by Michaela DiLeonardo called The Female World of Holiday Cards and Letters. And she wrote it in the 80s. And it was about how much time and energy it takes for women to do stuff that's considered common, but it's also considered women's work. And it's also not really acknowledged as time consuming or effortful or mentally draining, to plan a Christmas card and execute it and get it mailed out and make sure everybody in the family looks good, all that stuff. And that is when it hit me about the idea of invisible labor and really starting to look around and say, well, where are the gaps in other forms of women's work that I'm not reading an article about it or we're not talking about it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. That's what the feminists of the 80s, 70s, and 80s were doing, was giving a name, giving various names to things that are real and true and exist, but they weren't really in our lexicon. And I was raised in a family of women, strong women, who were intent on keeping a family connection going. And that's when it kind of struck me, in my family, I show up in an important role. At that time, that's what I was thinking. I'm an important daughter to my parents, to my in-laws, and there's nothing written about how and why women do that. And that's kind of what led me on that journey.
I love that. We've had Dr. Morgan Cutlip on before, who has talked about mental labor, mental load, and what that looks like within marriage. But I love that you expand this to the conversation of what it looks like for family, for extended family, and how that shows up. Because yes, there's that relationship with our spouse and what happens in our homes, but a lot of the expectations we have on ourselves, a lot of the ways that we show up into our marriages have a lot to do with how we were primed as daughters and what was expected in our home of origin. And so it is so great to think, okay, how do we debrief that to understand maybe what some of the dynamics are afoot in our current situations today? I just love that that is something to think about. The other thing that is striking to me, Allison, is that we went on the Alzheimer's journey with my mom. It was my sister-in-law, who was a phenomenal daughter-in-law to my mother, that because of geographic proximity ended up being the person who carried so much of the weight of that season with my mom. And because I am the only girl in my family of origin, I cannot begin to tell you the level of guilt that I felt that it was my sister-in-law, my mother's daughter-in-law, who was carrying most of that, because I definitely felt imprinted upon myself, both from relationship with my mom. I cared, I wanted to be there for her, but also like, I am societally failing. I am the only girl in my family, and it's my sister-in-law who is having to do this because I don't live near them. It was such an interesting kind of journey to take, an interesting flavor of guilt that was a little bit different. So tell the listener where we're at when it comes to the fact that we do have parents who are living longer. We still have a lot of women who are the ones who are going to be the front line for doing these kinds of things, even if it's daughter-in-law, not daughter, biological daughter, but daughter-in-law. What is that landscape looking like today? As much as we've talked about wanting to promote women and wanting women to have opportunities and all that kind of stuff, do the stats really reflect that we've made a whole lot of progress in that direction? Where are we at?
Yeah. When it comes to caring for elders, elder care, that's an important phase of daughtering, right? It's not all of daughtering. We're daughtering in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s. We do daughtering when everybody's healthy and independent, but we're still working to keep a family connected. But it is a really visible time of life when adult daughters step up for their aging or elder parents. The research shows that it kind of like your system, it's based on geographic closeness. Of course, it's still based on gender. It's more likely to be a daughter than a son. It's also based on socioeconomic status or availability. I mean, you have to have the ability to not be at work or to give money towards something in order to show up to take someone to a doctor's appointment. You have to be able to either not be working or get off of work in order to go do that. So that's a socioeconomic privilege. And so in our current landscape, we're still seeing that narrative where we're hearing about the women and the pain points and the mental load and the exhaustion, but we're also still seeing a pretty privileged group that's able to show up for their parent. I'm not sure we're seeing all the stories of people whose parents are on Medicaid and, have to live alone in a place across the country from their child, and there's no adult children around to help them. Nobody's really putting that story on Instagram or TikTok, but it is happening. And so we still need the government programs, but largely we use that social reproductive labor, the invisible labor of daughters, to get so much done in families, but especially in elderhood. And I think the guilt is such an interesting concept, because I would bet that your sister-in-law never said to you, geez, Julie, you should be doing way more.
No,
or that your mom
amazing,
said to you, I'm so disappointed, Julie. And so part of what we do as women is we see work that needs to be done, and we tell ourselves, well, I should do it.
Yeah.
If I can see it, I should do it.
Yep.
And then we don't like allowing other people to do the work, or even allowing our parent to excuse us from the work. No. If I can see work that could be done, I should do it. And that's kind of a personal crisis that we're having, of how to set our own boundaries, how to measure our own bandwidth, our battery, how to notice where else in our lives we need to give our attention to. And therefore we have to, monitor the amount we give to one area or the other. But it is really a fascinating space that many women are in. And it's not only once your parents are just ill at right that moment. There's a big lead up to thinking about that and noticing it around you.
Absolutely. You're a professor at Baylor University, and you have a new book coming out called Good Daughtering, the work you've always done, the credit you've never gotten, and how to finally feel like enough. I love this idea, this phrase that you've created called doing daughtering. Doing daughtering is just such a great alliteration. How do you define what doing daughtering is? What's the concise way?
Sure.
What's the handhold you can give us to understand when we are in that place of doing daughtering?
Daughtering is the often invisible mental, emotional, logistical, and identity labor that women do in families, adult daughters do in families, to try to keep everybody connected. And frequently, we're not even aware that we're doing it until we're burnt out or there's some perspective shift given to us. And so doing daughtering is about the multiplicity of ways that we perform that, and has to do with how we give daughtering as a gift, how we do daughtering as obligation, how we consider future daughtering or past daughtering as part of our identity, and whether we've done a good job or lived a good life. So, doing family is kind of a term that we might find in the research literature that families don't just occur, and ties and connection are not just simple serendipity. These are active spaces where if we want to be in a family, we have to do family. If we want to participate, we have to show up. If we want to benefit, we've got to contribute. And if there's active stuff going on, then the question is, who's doing the active stuff? And that draws us into noticing the effort. And with daughtering, I like to think of that as a form of work, or multiple types of different work. And that can sometimes lead people to think that I'm complaining about it or telling others to complain about it. But really, I want to think about it in the same way that we think about parenting. It's time. It takes time. It has a toll on your body. You have to sacrifice many things. And yet you can also like it. You can also be glad you did it. You can also enjoy these people in your life. And that doesn't take away from us saying it's work. And there's something about saying that it's work that gives us a sense that this work matters. It matters to my family. It matters to society. It matters to me feeling like a good person who lived a good life. And I would like a conversation for all of us around that just elevates the value of daughtering. And you don't have to do less of it or more of it or do it any differently, just to have a conversation about it that says this is a beautiful part of women's life and a beautiful part of our identity.
You think that you are in the final round of getting all this parenting done. You've got kids who are in high school, you're starting to think about college, and you're thinking, this is it. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm a podcaster and I'm a mom of 8. And here's what I want you to know about George Fox University. It's a different way of doing college. Why? Because yes, it's all about getting a fantastic degree to set your kid up for their future. They have 60 undergrad programs available at George Fox University. But that's not where the story ends. It's also about equipping them spiritually. If you get out of college with a degree, but you don't have a closer relationship with God, that obviously is going to deeply impact what your young adult life looks like. So for your kiddos, I want you to consider, what would it mean for your child to be able to go to George Fox University, where 93% of George Fox students say they now have a closer relationship with Jesus? George Fox University is located in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. They have 23 Division III athletic programs, and 100% of students at George Fox University receive financial aid. George Fox University is dedicated to their promise. They want every student to be known for who God created them to be. So listen, parents, yeah, you are getting into some of those final laps, but you definitely want to make these last laps count in a big way when it comes to the legacy of your parenting. So be sure and check out for your student, georgefox.edu. That's georgefox.edu. I love this phrase that you've equipped us with, which is that Daughtering, it's the silent engine of family life. That very dedicated, devoted daughter who might be in the middle of an extended family is often the one who gets the crew together for the family reunion, throws the birthday parties, does all the things that really help in that way. Talk to me about the disparity between daughters. Now, I don't have sisters. I have three spectacular sister-in-laws, two through my brothers, and then one through my husband. But I don't have sisters in the classic sense. So I'm the daughter. I'm the one. And one thing I have observed in other families where there are 2, 3, 4 daughters, however many, is sometimes I've seen the one daughter, not always necessarily the eldest daughter. Oftentimes it is, but a lot of times it's not, who is really, of the daughters, the one who is doing the daughtering, and the others are kind of in the wake, and equal parts appreciative, equal parts she's bossy, kind of attitude. So what are some of the dynamics you see between that? Do you sometimes see a tug of war for preeminence as the daughter? Do you see daughters who kind of throw their hands up and go, we're just going to let that one run with it? What does that look like from your purview?
Well, I love this conversation, and it brings us into this idea of birth order, but it also asks us to evaluate what could the other context be that maybe I just don't know about or haven't heard about. So I'll go back to that there are many different reasons why a daughter shows up in a family or seems to be the one who's the only one showing up or shows up more. And not, of course, including personality. Some people just like domestic type social reproductive work more, while others are more interested in their career work. But we also see that proximity is really important, geographic proximity, again, socioeconomic availability to do these things. And then, recently we've had a lot of people saying, but birth order too. And I'm not sure that we have yet the research to back up that birth order has a causal relationship. But we do know that when we're in childhood, that if you're the oldest female sibling, and then you have a lot of siblings that come after that, or even a few, your life experiences are different than the baby of the family who doesn't have a caring, noticing, monitoring type of activity that starts even in the tiniest of years. But I think that one of the issues I want to draw attention to that I'd ask your listeners to consider is that sometimes we're just mistaking what daughtering is. And so we think that one daughter's doing all the daughtering, but we're only looking at the task part. Because there's also emotional daughtering. Right. There's also logistical daughtering. There's, financial falls under that. So maybe you live across the country and you can't be there to take soup to mom or, go to church with them and sit in the same pew on Sunday or attend every graduation and, holiday, Memorial Day event. But you send money. Or you have one big vacation every year and you kind of take everybody out to dinner when nobody else can do that. And then, there's also the mental load and the logistical type of daughtering. So one of the things that my sister and I agreed to about 2 years ago was we agreed to see and notice each other's daughtering and validate that it was important. And that worked pretty well because she's a proximity daughter. She is down the street and she has a little bit younger children. So my parents interact with them by going to the kids' stuff or watching the kids. And she will cook a meal and take it down there, or she'll pick them up and drive them somewhere. They'll see each other at, religious events, that kind of thing. I live farther away. I can't do those regular things, but I tend to try harder at mood management and emotional investment. And I'm just very lucky that my sister agreed to notice that as important, that was important to the family system, that it was important to my mom. And ultimately, if I was doing it, it gave my sister, who doesn't want to do it, a little bit of a break. So we agreed to partner instead of feeling bitter at the other person for not doing that. So when my sister doesn't emotionally connect with, something going on, or doesn't call and worry and scan the room for these things, I'm not upset about it. I'm not expecting her to do it. It's not her thing. And also, It is my thing. We agreed. We separated it. So that's a couple of different answers to what you're asking, but I think we can find a lot of the answers in noticing more types of daughtering. And so what may be happening is that more of the daughters are doing daughtering than we realize. They're just doing it in different ways. And many of those ways are invisible. So it's up to us to notice them, to see them, to call them out, and to say, that's a valid way to be showing up in our family, to be doing family.
I really appreciate that you call out this difference, this perspective on we do tend to catalog the tasks, the very productive, well, this daughter goes over and cleans out the closet or handles this or takes to the doctor's appointment, whatever. And yet at the same time, you're right. There are many other types of investments that daughters are making into extended family life that might not look like tasks and therefore aren't as easily cataloged as such. So the beauty of conversations surrounding the different roles that perhaps each daughter can play, and if there's a daughter-in-law, what that's going to look like. Talk to me too about this, the interplay of where sons should come into the conversation. Obviously, there needs to be this recognition of what daughters are doing and their function and dynamic within family. And I'm very curious to hear your perspective on where sons are at. I feel really fortunate that my brothers were very engaged in the situation with my mom. I have brothers who, they cook, they clean, they're very engaged with their kids. They both run hard and have busy careers, and they somehow have scaffolded well in terms of their insertion in family life. But I have plenty of other peers in my age range who that's not the story. And so, yeah, that might be the son's mom, but he's going to rely on, and not in a way that is spoken, understood, hashed out, and strategic. It's just going to be, he's going to get a proxy daughter because his wife's going to handle whatever. So how does that look today? Give me a snapshot of where we're at intergenerationally when it comes to sons and how that impacts daughtering.
Yeah. So we're talking about a lot of gendered communication, and we're talking about the way that someone was raised and things that they learned in childhood or over decades of time, and then how that starts to show up or doesn't show up. So like you were saying, one of the first things I want to say is that sons are sunning. Many sons are showing up really well. I've learned so much about caring behaviors from watching my husband care for his parents, his dad in his last days, and his mom, who has a chronic illness even now. And I think that one of the big picture things that we should say is just that guys aren't expected to do it. So there are many men doing it. They're doing it in various ways, to various degrees, various amounts, various effectiveness. But in general, culturally, men are not expected to lean into family life, to say to everyone out loud, my mom is my favorite person, or I'd rather be at a barbecue with all my family members than out at a baseball game with my buddies. We give men, and we have sort of a cultural vision of men, that they go out and achieve. They seek career kudos, and they have guy time. And they don't have to worry as much about whether the family's, emotionally satisfied. They're not attuned to the emotional radar. So again, a lot of task-driven things. The other thing is that when men do show up in families, we often clap for them real big. Like, oh, Julie, it sounds like you are one of the lucky ones. All these men. And the things that you're saying your brothers are doing are just baseline things women are doing. Right. But we're like super praising them. And again, no shade to those guys. That is an expression of our cultural expectation and our cultural response to when we see men doing family time. So where are we in a snapshot? I think that generationally, we're seeing so much more interest in men caring for families. And that's not spontaneous. It's taught. It is groomed, that over time that, so Julie, your mom, encouraged your brothers to be thoughtful, to be empathetic, to notice, to monitor the family. I am raising a teenage son, 17, about to be 18. And I have intentionally over the past several years thought, I want him to be a loving and kind and empathetic person for his future spouse or partner, and his in-laws, but also for me. So I've got to demand that from him and hold him accountable now.
Yeah.
And millions of experiences over his lifetime will then lead up to him doing it well in adulthood. So I think we're seeing an evolution.
Right.
But generations take a really long time. But when we as women hold men accountable, that's normal. It's an expectation. When a man shows up and we don't extra clap, but we also don't tease him, mama's boy, which is considered negative, we just we normalize it, then we're going to get that more and more. And ultimately, that's a benefit to families and society.
Right. I love that you are pointing out that as moms, we need to be intentional with our sons, not thinking, oh, well, when he gets married, his wife will figure this out so that then he'll be connected to me in a good way when he's, no, that mother-son relationship has to be curated and developed between the mother and son. That's not going to be a wife's responsibility ultimately.
And if you don't do it when they're little, there's still time now.
Right.
It's small things like when my son calls me and he's excited about something, or he comes home and we talk and I'll say, well, how was your day? Then I expect him to say, how was your day? And I get to talk and he has to listen. And if he doesn't do that, I call him on it, because not only will that make him a great partner, it could make him a great lawyer, a politician, but it makes him a nice person to live with in his family home, no matter who those family members are. I don't think we always ask that of men, to listen, to understand, to listen, to think about the moods and the experiences of the people who they love. But when we do that, whether they're 5, 15, 25, 45, if we say like, well, hey, it's my turn, you can't get off the call yet, I want to talk about my life and my experience, and I want you to go, oh, ooh, and then like, okay, you're released, but you owe me some emotionality. And we have to demand it if we're not getting it yet.
Right. Has to be taught. I love that. My folks were the kind of people that they said, hey, we love you guys. We're going to raise you in our home. We're going to hopefully get you launched with a moral code of ethics and strong faith. And here's your college education. But then, baby, you've launched. Like, you're on your own, and we are also independent. And even though the chronic illness my dad had that ultimately led to the end of his life, and then my mom going on the Alzheimer's journey until she passed, even though those situations required tactically a lot of caregiving, my parents were very, very independent in terms of their financial needs, in terms of when we would get a call. It was actually frustrating in the opposite direction. Like, why didn't you call me? Like, why didn't you tell me what was going on? I contrast that to situations that I'm aware of with some of my friends where there's an expectation on the part of parents, oh, you're going to be completely available to me. I did all these things for you to get you raised and get you launched, and now you need to be on call 24/7 for my emotional needs, for when I'm lonely, for when I have a doctor's visit, for when I have this, that, and the other. How do we craft something that is healthy, that is honoring, and yet at the same time, and I realize this can be so cultural, Allison, I have friends from different cultural backgrounds that this is baked into their culture, that yes, you take care of mom and dad financially. They move into your house at a certain point. And I think those are beautiful things if that's what people have agreed to and that is what they love. I find for a lot of us living in a Western culture, living in a more American culture, we don't really have a lot of great parameters or understanding of what this all should look like. And sometimes people get surprised. So what are you helping daughters think about and talk about and strategize for when it comes to these various times where parents may need a little bit more care, but there still should be some independence and lines? I mean, what does all that look like?
Yeah, it's so interesting and wonderful to think about how your parents did parenting, and they made a particular choice and they were like, you're launched and now you're independent. And, if we were evaluating that from like a communication scientist lens, we wouldn't just call it, greatest generation or boomer parenting, we would evaluate all the different types of things we see there, like privacy rules and respect rules and closeness and intimacy. And we'd evaluate each of those things, almost like tuning up little different dials. And so we might see trends across people of the same generation, but of course, key differences family to family. And so I think one of the lessons we can take from your parents who are like, this is how we're parenting and no bones about it, not ashamed, not embarrassed, don't feel I need to do it any differently, is that we have that agency to decide our daughtering in the same way. Okay, here's how I'm daughtering. This is how much money, time, energy, this is where I live. This is all the people who live in my immediate home. And so here's how I'm going to do daughtering. This is what you get. And we don't need to have a conversation about whether you like it or don't like it, because your emotions about these decisions about daughtering are yours to handle and mine are mine to handle. It sounds to me like that's what your parents said. Like they weren't launching you and saying, I dislike you, I'm cold towards you, cold shoulder. They were indicating what makes a good life for them. And so this is where I really want us to dig in, whether it's a cultural expectation that you have your parents in your home, or that you send all your money back to your country of origin, or that you call on the phone 6 times a week, or that you solve the loneliness of your parent by watching golf with them, every Sunday. What we can forget is that we have a choice. We have agency and we get to decide. And I think the bottom line is that we get to decide, does this make me happy? Is this contributing to a good society, a good relationship? Is this making a good life for me? Am I a good daughter? And too often what I see is that we're going along and getting along, but we're never actually stopping and deciding that. Whereas your parents had a certainty that they felt good about how they had done. I did this much, we're done. But you did bring up this idea of like, I gave you stuff in childhood and now you owe me. And I will say that's a very economic mindset, which you will often find a little bit more of here in the United States than you might have around the world. And I want us to be aware of this sort of credit, debit, investment, ROI mindset that we can sometimes have as daughters. And maybe it's because our parents have that mindset, but we can ask ourselves, do I buy into that? Am I only worthy and loved and lovable if I do? If I keep paying into that? Or is this one of those accounts that's, a scam? They keep taking my money and I'm not getting anything out of it. Because ultimately, the difference in parenting a child who's a minor and has no choice and has no independence, when we're daughtering our parent, they are full-fledged adults who are responsible for their own actions, and they're responsible for their current level of happiness. And so the last part of that is just remembering, again, just because I can see what could be done, and I also know I have the skill to do it, doesn't mean it's actually mine to pick up. I can let my parent have unhappiness, tension, disconnect, and just let them live inside that until they figure out how to fix it, or they don't. And not every single bit of that is on me to do for them, because when I do for them, I'm taking from some other part of my life.
Right. I think this whole arena of how to honor our parents throughout lifetime, throughout seasons, throughout specific needs. The honor may be the precept. The particulars requires, a lot of maturity and a lot of willingness to communicate well, to communicate honestly about what really is going to work. And I think that is one of the key things you've pointed out in this whole thing of daughtering, is daughtering up to have those deep conversations, a really important thing to do. Well, we could keep going and going because I think this is so fascinating, but I want to honor your time. I want to make sure that the listener knows where to go to find the book, to find more of your work, all the things. So where are the best links for us to go find?
Well, the book again is Good Daughtering, and you can find this anywhere fine books are sold. It's in your local Barnes and Noble, but it's on Amazon, it's on Books A Million, it's on all of those great book sites. It's also available on my website at Daughtering 101. You can find me on all the socials at Daughtering 101. And I loved what you said there at the end. We have to be in charge of a lot of it. And that's what the book is for, is helping to put women back in charge of our daughtering, or helping the men in our lives understand the constraints that we're feeling that they can't really know about because they don't live it. And every chapter has activities, suggestions, research-based ideas for not only doing your own internal work, but also talking to your loved ones and making those small shifts that really matter over time. I want women to have better relationships and better lives.
I love that. Well, Dr. Allison Alford, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. I know that you will inspire all kinds of conversations and important places of self-reflection to decide what it means. This role, the first role that all of us are born with, which is that of being a daughter. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Okay, friend, you know what to do. We've got show notes with all the links and everything that Dr. Alford was talking about. So be sure and go there and give her a follow on Instagram. Help get out the message about taking a look at what your daughtering, my daughtering, all the daughtering, what it looks like. I love it too when you come over and say hi to me. I'm usually over on Instagram at Julie Lyles Carr. And be sure and check out AllMomDoes.com. AllMomDoes on the socials. You're going to find an awesome community of daughters there who are walking through and working through the same things that you are. Grab the link from this episode and send it to somebody who you know would be so engaged and would be so equipped by this conversation. That's just one of the best things you can do for us when you do that. And I will see you next time on the All Mom Does podcast.